that we are all doing in our own ways, we have to think about affirming identity. How do we affirm the identities of all of the people in our group? Whether that is, I don't mean all of the people in this room, I mean all of the people in the organization. And so the importance of that, and of course this is important in classrooms as well, and I'm sure those of you thinking about this in an educational context will completely understand the importance of affirming identity. Because when you don't affirm identity, those who are not feeling affirmed are feeling marginalized, feeling left out. The best way to make this point, and the way I usually make it when I'm talking to audiences, is really very simple, and it's one where, I'm standing here looking at the videographer in the back who's obviously videoing this presentation, but let's imagine there was a photographer up front, a still photographer up front, taking a picture of all of you gathered here for this important meeting. And at the end of the meeting, as a token of your participation, you got a copy of the photo. What is the first thing you are going to do when you get your copy? You're going to look for yourself in the picture. There's no other answer to that question. No one is going to say, I'm looking for Susan, except Susan, right? After you've found yourself, you might then look for Susan or me or somebody else, but you're going to look for yourself first. You're going to see, how did I come out? Am I smiling? Are my eyes open? How do I look in this picture? But let's imagine that you got the picture back, and through the wonders of modern technology, you have been digitally removed from the picture. So you get the picture, and I am looking at the gentleman here in the brown sweater, and let's imagine, he said I was sitting right there in the line of sight, but the picture has come and he has been removed. Where we thought there was a person, nobody there. If that were to happen repeatedly, you get the picture, you come to these events, you do these TFA things, you get these pictures, and every time you're missing from it, you would start to wonder, first you'd wonder what's wrong with the picture. After a while, you'd start to wonder, what's wrong with me? Am I invisible? I was right there. I remember being right there. I was there how come, somebody trying to, is this a Twilight Zone? You would start to feel something is not right about this setting. And let's imagine that group photo was being taken at the end of the program, and you asked everybody to wait. Don't go get your cab, don't go get your suitcase, wait and have your picture taken. But you've done that, 10 times, and each time your picture's not there. Sooner or later, somebody's going to say, let's all gather up, and you're going to say, you know what, I'm going to beat the crowd and get my coat now. Because there's no point in participating if I'm not going to be included. That sense of checking out is going to happen. When we think about the fact that people check out when they have not been affirmed, then it emphasizes the importance of why we must do that. But then we also have to think about building community. How do we bring people together? Now, this is building community, right? You've brought all the people of color together, but what about your white colleagues? Or they may be feeling like, this is divisive. And so how do we fit into this? Well, if they had their own gathering where they could talk about, how does it feel to sometimes not be part of the people of color group? And why might that be important? And what's the work that we can be doing and need to do as we think about our own identities in the context of working in urban environments or rural environments where most of the students are kids of color? Then you might feel more included. You can do the A and the B together, but it's very difficult to do the B without the A. And then the C, cultivating leadership, is really about how do we model this for the next generation? How do we, and by the next generation, I don't necessarily mean the next, it could mean the K through 12 students you're all working with, but maybe it's the next generation of TFA core members. Maybe it's the next generation of staff members amongst yourselves. How do we develop that capacity so that we can engage in this conversation and we build our capacity to have the conversation in ways that advance the work of the organization? All of that is what's on my mind this afternoon. Susan has given me the high sign, which is to suggest that now I better stop talking or else it won't be a conversation. So let me hear from you. What questions do you have? Now it is? Yes, now it is. So my charge to you would be to keep the conversation going, even when it gets difficult. So let me say this, just by way of context. So when I first started teaching about the psychology of racism, one of the things that I would notice is, in the course of, let's say, a 14, 15-week semester, around week 4 or 5, there would be a significant drop-off in attendance. And I had students keeping journals. And so the students who were keeping journals would write in their journals around that time, this information is too much for me. I am tired of hearing about racism. I don't want to think about these issues. I don't want to see another film about stereotyping. It's just overwhelming to me. And so after I got a little experience teaching the class, I made a attendance requirement. And so I basically penalized people if they didn't come to class. But I said to them at the beginning, I said, about week number 5, you're going to want to stop coming to class. I expect you to come anyway, and then we'll talk about why you don't want to be here. Why is it hard to be in this conversation? Why is it hard to have a prolonged conversation? Now, the reality is it does get easier, but it gets hard before it gets easy. And so if you allow people to stop before it gets to that better place, they never get to that better place. So part of the challenge to all of you is, in your staff meetings and your work with core members, is to keep the conversation going even when it feels uncomfortable and they say they don't want to have it. You have to keep now, there's some things that can make it better, and, there's things that you can do to help process it, but you have to keep having it. And if you don't, this is my best analogy I'm going to share with you. It's like, have you ever had an ear infection or a kid with an ear infection? You may know if you get an ear infection or some other kind of problem that requires an antibiotic, they always tell you to take the whole thing, right? And I mention ear infections because if you have children or you've had this experience, the stuff they give you, you don't like the taste of it, and after you take it a couple of days, your ear will feel better, right? And in fact, you wonder, why do I have to keep taking it? My ear doesn't hurt anymore, right? But if you stop, what will happen is that the ear infection will come back, and it will come back worse. And when it comes back, the medication you were taking the first time is less likely to work, right? Because you get superbugs and all of that. Well, in some ways, dialogue around issues of race and racism are like that. If you start the dialogue and don't carry it all the way through to the end, what you do is trigger discomfort. And then people say, I don't want to have this conversation because it makes me uncomfortable. But the behaviors that are needed to be worked through continue. And so, but my experience is that if you have the conversation and keep people engaged past the point of discomfort, you do start to get to a place where, gosh, we can talk about this, and it's not so hard, and it's even energizing. That's the thing that was really interesting to me as I learned more and more about the teaching process, was that people would say at the end, this was so energizing. And I used to think, well, why would they use that word? Like, what's energizing about it? And then what dawned on me was we use a lot of energy not talking about it. It's like the elephant in the room. If there was a big elephant in this room and I asked you not to discuss it, you'd have to use a lot of energy trying to pretend the elephant